Hello and welcome to today's expert webinar presented by AccountantsWorld. We'll be getting started in about 3 minutes here. Just wanted to remind you, if you haven't downloaded Brian Tankersley's presentation yet, you can do so under the Handouts tab. And if you want to check out your two audio options, you can go to the Audio tab, select either computer speakers or phone call. If you select phone call, it'll give you a call-in number and an access code. Thanks again for your patience, and we'll be getting started here in about 3 minutes. Today's expert webinar with Brian Tankersley speaking on robotic automation and AI for CPAs. I want to thank you for joining us today. We're excited to get started. My name is Div Bensali. I'm a vice president here at AccountantsWorld. We sponsor the expert webinar series with 15 expert speakers this year. So we're looking forward to Brian's talk, and I'll talk a little bit later about the rest of our expert webinar series coming up, including a webinar next week. Before I turn things over to Brian in just a minute here, a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't used the GoToWebinar tool in a little bit, if you're looking for the control panel, just look for an orange arrow. That will allow you to expand or hide the control panel for GoToWebinar. If you'd like to see your audio options, you can go to the audio section and then select either telephone or computer speakers. If you select phone call, you'll be given a dial-in number and an access code to be able to listen in and participate today. You can download the handout from the Handouts tab. If you haven't already done so, you should see Brian's PDF of his presentation there. And then finally, if you have any questions for Brian, go ahead and expand the question section, type your question, and click send. I also wanted to mention that one free CP is offered for today's webinar, and that's based on active participation. Active participation means three things. Number one, you attend the live webinar for no less than 50 minutes. Number two, you respond to all 4 of the poll questions during today's webinar. And number three, after you close out of the webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey pop up. Go ahead and fill out that survey and click submit within 24 hours after the webinar has ended. If you don't see the webinar survey or the post-webinar survey show up, no worries. We'll send you an email after today's presentation with another link to that survey. You'll be notified of your eligibility for CP within 3 business days. Please bear with us. It takes a little bit of time for us to confirm eligibility and send that out. And the other thing we always ask you to do is to add webinar@accountantsworld.com to your trusted email list and whatever email platform you're using to make sure that our emails and your CP credit come through to you. Also, just wanted to mention, if you're on Twitter, you can tweet along with us. Tom, our marketing coordinator, will be on Twitter as well, and you can use the hashtag #expertwebinar to follow along with the conversation and contribute to the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. Before I turn things over to Brian, a couple of quick words about him. He is a director at K2 Enterprises, one of the leading providers of content throughout the year, primarily from State CPA Society shows, but also from many other avenues on what's happening in the world of accounting technology and processes. He is a leading advisor on technology issues, not only issues, but also opportunities that public accounting firms can take advantage of. And I think that's part of what we're going to be discussing today. Brian has 7 times been recognized as one of the top 25 thought leaders in public accounting technology by Cygnus Media. And before I turn it over to him, I should also mention that I believe he is a Tennessee volunteer. So please extend both your attention and your condolences to my friend, Brian Tankersley.
Oh, well, thank you, Div. I appreciate it. Yes, it's a depressing time to be a Tennessee fan, but you know, that's one of those things we have to deal with. You know, when it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's ugly.
That's right.
So, you know, I mean, there's really nothing. There's really no accounting for it. You know, when I was at the University of Tennessee in the early '90s, we had an atrocious basketball team and an amazing football team, and we've just swapped the 2 out. So, you know, it just proves that. You know, there's no you know, figuring things out here. So anyway, it's interesting times. I think some pranksters went and rented a U-Haul and parked it in front of Jeremy Pruitt's house. I'm not sure though. So it's interesting times for sure. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Div. I appreciate it, and I'm so glad to be with you all today. This session is called Robotics Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence Concepts for Accounting Professionals. And our goal with this is to introduce some concepts to you here. This is an emerging technology, so it's a technology that some of you may have implemented, but the vast majority of you probably haven't implemented it. So anyway, that's kind of our goal here. And hopefully we'll go through here and get you some tips and some things that you can work with during your, in your practice and get some ideas here, in addition to just getting you an hour of CPE. Now, again, my name's Brian Tankersley. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I am at BFT CPA on Twitter. So if any of you are trading things with Tom on Twitter, you can just tag me as well at BFT CPA, and I'll respond to it after the webinar. K2 Enterprises does continuing professional education for 48 of the 50 state CPA societies, as well as in Canada. And we also, we do live in-person webinars, in-person presentations. We do outsourced technology conferences for about 25 of the state CPA societies around the country. If we can help you, again, just visit our website at k2e.com. Now, I've got some learning objectives in here, but our goal here again is to introduce some of these concepts in here and to help you learn a little bit about what's happening in here. One of the hardest things about being in practice is that even though you get to see the results of accounting softwares and other things, you don't always get to see how the business processes are working inside these different organizations. And there's been a sea change in how we run businesses with, again, with process-oriented systems, with again, low-code, no-code solutions, and other pieces in here. There's a whole new world of opportunity out here for practitioners to not only get their own business processes in order, but also to help their clients get their business processes in order using some of these tools that don't require you to be a programmer. Okay, we're going to go through and talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the tasks that are suitable for these early automation efforts, and talk a little bit about what processes are going to require a little bit more sophistication. Now, again, the thing you need to know about all of this is that when we look at things like RPA and artificial intelligence, these have been getting implemented in the enterprises for years. Okay, the thing that again is a significant challenge to a lot of us in practice is that we don't know what we don't know, because we may not have worked with an enterprise-sized company in a long time. So as a result, we don't know how other people are doing things, and so we don't understand that the opportunity is even out there. Because let's face it, back office robotic process automation is not one of those topics that we expect to come up when you're going to watch my beloved Vols lose or something else like that. So as you're thinking about this now, we're going to try to get you a roadmap and show you some of the things here. So we're going to talk about some emerging technology trends, the basics of robotic process automation, and some fundamentals related to artificial intelligence. But with that, let's go ahead and do our first polling question. Does your firm offer client accounting services? Okay, so so that's the first polling question.
Alrighty, and we will launch that right here for everybody. Hi, everybody. This is Tom. I'm a marketing coordinator here at AccountantsWorld. And let's read that off. Like Brian said, does your firm offer client accounting services, or CAS? Yes, we have a significant CAS practice. Yes, we do a little CAS, but it's not the focus. No, but we are thinking about implementing CAS. No, and we have no plans to do so. And just another reminder, as Div said at the top of the presentation, completing all of the polling questions is required for CPE. So we will get these in right now. We have about 93% that have voted. We'll keep this open for just another couple seconds here. Alrighty, going once, going twice, going 3 times, and we'll close it out here. All right, let's share those results, Brian. Right, so a little over 35% said yes, we do a little CAS, but it's not the focus, and then 30% said yes, we do have a significant CAS practice. Do you find that that's sort of in line with your findings, Brian?
It is. You know, I think there's some people that are running toward it. I think there's some people that are dabbling with it, and a lot of people are thinking about it. You know, as we look at where people think the profession is going in terms of advisory services and other areas like that, one of the most important things to remember here is that whoever keeps the books is the first person that's going to see the numbers that would indicate that there's potentially an advisory service need. Okay, so even though people look at this and they say, well, you know, I don't really want to have anything to do with payroll or client write-up or whatever. I'm just going to do advisory services. The problem is you may be second, third, or fourth to the party if you're not keeping your hands in the middle of that general ledger, watching what's happening in near real time. So it's really a strategic thing that we're looking at there when we look at client accounting services. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Now, when we look at this, we do have a lot of areas of automation out there. There are things holding it back, though. When we look at large organizations, many of those large organizations, you know, have scale to where they can implement some of these solutions. Smaller organizations, like many of your firms and organizations, you know, small, mid-sized businesses, haven't historically adopted tools like robotic process automation tools and artificial intelligence tools, because maybe we don't have enough data to really do the AI with machine learning. Maybe we don't have, you know, maybe we don't have the scale we need or enough of one particular kind of transaction to where it makes sense to create an automated script. We also have a lot of legacy applications out there. There are tools like CData that you can use to pull data, to let you pull data in and out of things, but you know, again, that requires some programming. A lot of people are also so concerned with issues like cybersecurity that they don't invest the time they need to streamline and automate their processes. Finally, in here, some of the technologies have really been oversold by early market entrants, and so it made people somewhat soured on them before they actually worked. All right, so we have to be very careful in here to differentiate the hype from what's actually taking place in the marketplace. You know, if you look at what actually works versus what the hype is, you know, an example of this would be blockchain. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I heard blockchain, you know, it's a very interesting technology, and I certainly think that in the long term, it's going to be an important technology to the profession, even in the intermediate term. But blockchain is very much like SQL databases were 20 years ago, where accountants need to know what it is, but they don't need to know the specs down in excruciating detail. They need to understand where it fits in the strategy and what some of the you know, strengths and weaknesses are of it, but they don't need to go in and necessarily dig into each block and you know, in excruciating detail. Now, I want to talk about, you know, with that in mind and the hype in here, I want to show you here, this is something from what's called the Gartner Hype Cycle for Emerging Technologies. Okay, this is something that the Gartner Group creates every year. The idea behind it is that in the beginning, when something's discovered, there's what's called an innovation trigger. We then go to the peak of inflated expectations. And if you look up at the zenith of that, you can see that deep neural nets and deep learning are up there at the top. You know, then we look now at the trough of disillusionment, where people are dissatisfied with it, but they're actually starting to get work done with it. So they're way down on it. And finally, over time, they actually reach the slope of enlightenment and then the plateau of productivity so that they can see what's going on there. Now, if you look at the icons across here, you can see that some of them are light blue in here. And then, you know, let's actually look at my scale up here, notice we have some gray, we don't have any gray icons that say that there's the plateau of productivity is going to be achieved in the less than 2 years. We have light blue, which says that the plateau will be reached in 2 to 5 years. We have dark blue, which says 5 to 10 years, and then the yellow triangles that say more than 10 years. And so I think it's instructive to look at what's almost here, because these are the things that I think are going to, you know, the emerging technologies that I think have the most potential to change things for you in the intermediate term. Notice 5G, cellular, you've been hearing a lot about that with Huawei and other organizations out there. Deep learning, deep neural networks, even though the deep learning and deep neural networks are at the top of the hype cycle right now, we still think they're only a couple of 2 to 5 years out. There are also special chips called application-specific integrated circuits that are out there to do deep neural networks. And then finally, virtual assistants are a final technology out there. Now, we've gone through here and looked at what some of the things are that are 5 to 10 years out. Notice blockchain for data security, artificial intelligence platform as a service, smart robots, blockchain, again, connected home, smart fabrics, augmented reality. Then what's 10 plus years out? Notice that our autonomous driving level 4 and level 5 both appear on here. Okay, that I think is very important to you because certainly self-driving cars are working at some level with Teslas in desert climates and so forth. However, if you live anywhere in a red state like I do in East Tennessee, where it rains or where it snows or where we have fog, those things don't work. In again, they can't get enough stuff in here. Now, the difference in autonomous driving level 4, autonomous driving level 4 means that the car can go anywhere on roads that have been mapped, and it can drive itself on any of those environments. Autonomous driving level 5 means it can go on road or off road. Okay, so the difference again in 4 and 5 is that level 4 is on road only, level 5 is on road or off road. So I want you to see that because I think that's an important thing to consider here. Now, I actually worked with Randy Johnston and Casey Johnson at AI CPA on the CPA.com accounting profession megatrends in here. This was Casey's idea. They actually went through here and she used the same framework as the Gartner hype cycle and then put some of the technologies affecting accounting on top of that. And I think that's an instructive tool there. Notice that software as a service and optical character recognition are in there. Big data is next, and we've all heard about big data and analytics. We have next then robotic process automation, which is one of our major topics. Then we just go through and you can see you have the other ones just navigating through there, okay? So what I'd like you to see is that even though you may not have heard much about robotic process automation, it's front of mind for a lot of folks in the industry, and it's starting to make a significant change, especially in larger organizations. Remember, the scale, the challenges of scale are always going to be working against the small business because the big businesses will have many, many more clients, many, many more opportunities to take advantage of these things because they'll have more transactions, frankly, or more similar transactions. When we now look at this, though, on the small business side, the opportunity here is going to emerge as we get to lower cost implementations. We may actually get to the point where we have a bot store where you can just go buy a bot that somebody else has developed instead of having to develop it yourself. Now, when we look at emerging technologies, it has the potential to be disruptive to your current business. Not taking advantage of it could cost you a lot of money in here. An important one is the third one in here, okay? Hype drives FOMO, fear of missing out, all right? Now, I don't think you should completely ignore FOMO, but I think you also need to avoid getting drawn in by the newest thing that's shiny in your world, okay? The vendors are going to try to drive you to invest, and some of the early implementations of these technologies may not work out so well. There are organizations now that are talking about being able to have bots to do bookkeeping, and that's an interesting concept. But I will tell you that I've looked at most of the major products that are sold to accountants and have written a couple hundred product reviews. I've not seen many of those. I've not seen anybody yet that's using bots to fully get rid of bookkeeping, to fully handle bookkeeping. So I want you to understand here that there's a lot of hype and people are trying to create a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt so they'll have opportunity so that they can get your money. But again, I would suggest that these things don't work until you see them work with your data. Now, a lot of this stuff also, a lot of these emerging technologies are also driven by data science. So a lot of the large CPA firms now, especially the big four and the top 50, are starting to hire, in addition to CPAs, they're hiring data scientists that can help them with not only descriptive statistics like we use in analytics, but they can also help with inductive statistics, where we're figuring out causation or the relationship between some of these things. Now, as we look at this, we've got a lot of different technologies to look at. And so I'm going to start out with kind of a Venn diagram here. And so when we think about the emerging technologies, we're going to put them into this Venn diagram up here. Notice that all of this is built on a foundation of computing power. So we're going to have computing power we're going to need to deal with these emerging technologies. We're going to have floating point computing or general computing that you've heard about before. That's what we do with our PCs. We have graphics computing. That's like our graphics cards that you have. Then we may also have quantum computing, okay? And so what quantum computing is, that's where we're going in and we have, it's a new emerging kind of computing that will actually go in and actually deals a lot with uncertainty and multiple different solutions in here. Now, you can see we have big data in one of the circles over here, and we think of big data as things with 1 million or more rows of data. And, you know, again, we have cognitive computing over here as well. Now, cognitive computing is when we're trying to do things that humans normally would do. And then we have data analytics at our intersection, okay? So now looking at this, when we're looking at all of this, we're looking at all this now. You've got the intersection of the three over here, and we can go forward from there. Now, when we look at all of these now, you can see that we have the relationships of the emerging technologies, and this shows you where some of these others fall in here. I'm not going to go through these in a whole lot of detail, but what I do want you to see is that a lot of them involve this cognitive computing and big data, as well as again, you know, many of the other technologies that we're dealing with here. So when we look at our next thing, you know, the thing I would remind you of here is that, actually, you know what, let's go ahead and do our first polling question. So here's our next polling question. Which of the emerging technologies do you think will be first to have a real impact on your firm?
Alrighty, Brian. Like you said, which of the following emerging technologies do you think will be the first to have a real impact on your firm? So please select one of the above. Is it big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain and cryptocurrencies, or robotic process automation? And folks, if you have any questions on the material today that Brian is presenting, feel free to put a question into the questions tab in GoToWebinar. We will get to those questions as they appear or towards the end of Brian's presentation. All right.
All right.
We have about 93% that have voted here. We're just going to get another couple seconds. All righty, going once, going twice, going 3 times, and we're going to close this. And let's share those results, Brian. Okay. So which of the following emerging technologies do you think will be the first to have a real impact on your firm? 40% said AI, 30% said robotic process automation, and only 18% said big data. I thought that would be a little bit higher. What are your thoughts on the findings here, Brian?
I think it's pretty spot on. You know, there are actually tools out there now that are mining the data in tax software to identify planning opportunities for clients. And so that's a form of AI. You know, AI can pick up and pull a lot of things in here, and you know, there are things like optical character recognition that we used to think of as AI that now really doesn't represent AI anymore. So kind of an interesting thing that you have, and anyway, that's what you got. Now, looking at this, I want to remind you here of the Boeing 737 MAX. You know, they automated the stall prevention system in it, and as a result, the pilots weren't able to override it in 2 separate crashes, resulting in the death of 346 people. So the thing we've got to remember here is that it's not just that, you know, even though the automation in that technology had worked very successfully for quite some time, because it failed twice, As a result, the humans no longer trust that aircraft anymore. I was actually at a meeting in Indianapolis when they grounded those this spring, and there were a number of people at the meeting that were flying home, and some of them actually flew on 737 Maxes, and they were all talking about feeling like they were taking their lives in their own hands. So it's kind of an interesting time to be sure here. And again, let's just keep that in perspective here. Remember, we've had 346 deaths here of this, but we have 3,287 people a day that die globally in car and motorcycle crashes. So, you know, again, when we think about replacing this, it's not only that we have to get people comfortable that the technology works, we have to get comfortable with the technology after it's failed once or twice. So I think it's really important to remember that when you're going through looking at it. Okay, so we're going to start out now looking at robotic process automation, and now what this really is it's an emerging business process automation technology based on the notion of software robots or artificial intelligence workers, okay? The best way of thinking about this is it's very much like the macros and macro recording that you can do in Microsoft Excel, except you're not just limited to doing things inside of Excel. You can do things inside any application inside Windows. You can even interact with the internet with web browser and other things like that. So if you remember screen scraping from the 90s and late 80s, early 90s, where we went in and we would mine a certain area of a terminal screen to extract that data and then put it into a structured format. Robotic process automation can do those kinds of things, where it can actually read data off of a screen, or it can extract data from scanned documents using optical character recognition, or maybe they can even use APIs, application program interfaces, to work with a live system that's out there. Then it can turn around, and where screen scraping only read data from a screen, with the robotic process automation, we can enter data in. You can have the bot actually take data out of Excel and enter it into another application. So as you're going through and looking at this, the first generation solutions that were out there required a lot of time investment because you had to write all this stuff with code. And the problem is, whenever you start getting programmers involved, the cost on this kind of stuff goes way up. The second and third generation tools now do more unassisted learning. Think watching you do a task and then creating a routine to automate it, and they require quite a bit less upfront human intervention. So when we think about this now and how we're going to implement it here, we've got to start with process optimization, okay? And that means that you're going to come up and you're going to figure out what your business logic is that you're trying to accomplish in your business process, and then programs as much of it as you can into analytics or limit checks or other things like that, okay? Because, again, we don't want to add automation. For example, we don't want to have the perfect buggy whip rack as our new product, okay? Because nobody has buggy whips anymore outside of, the harness racing, I guess. So as we're thinking about this in here, we need to move toward this again, we're going to move from there, optimizing our processes, to rules-based automation tools and tools like optical character recognition, where we're going in and taking data off of paper documents like invoices and extracting it in a structured format, so that we have the invoice number in one field, and we have the vendor in another field, and the vendor address in another field, and then the amount of the date and amount and invoice number of the document. So again, with this, we're taking this unstructured data and making it structured. The next steps in here then would be, we'll use AI learning and API integrations so that we can program connections to integrate data or to extract data from other places. And again, as we're thinking about these kinds of things in here, notice a lot of that's going to be dependent upon the scale of the application. For example, depending on how many transactions you have, you may not have enough transactions for the item to be able to learn about it. But again, the hope here is that you're gonna have integrations so that they can get all the stuff working properly. Now, our first generation tools, again, required us to write code. And so for those to be implemented, we realistically had to have thousands, or if not millions of similar transactions to be able to implement those in those solutions. With these low code, no code solutions that we have now that are designed for where non-programmers can implement these, people like you and I that have more of a business analyst level view of the solution, as opposed to dealing with the folks that actually live it nuts, bolts, bits, and bytes inside the code every day. Notice that this actually helps us automate some of these things. An example of a tool that many of you may be familiar with is a tool called Microsoft Power Query. Power Query, I think, is one of the more important steps forward that Microsoft's made in automating the cleanup of data that we have to extract out of systems. And if you haven't seen Power Query, which is also known as Get and Transform in Excel 2016 and later, it's also available as an add-in for Excel 2013. Power Query, or Get and Transform as it's known in the later versions of Excel, is a big step forward for a number of reasons. Again, just because it helps us automate those routine tasks, so we don't have to go do those rote scripts by hand every time we need to clean up data. Now, as we think about this in the context of workflow evolution, the first step in most of these is to optimize processes and just to digitally track processes. Think of this like when we're going in and doing UPS package tracking. So we're doing work tracking, workflow management, and with that, we're taking unstructured data like paper to-do lists, and we're turning it into structured data so we can see when we get it done, how long it took, and have all that data in a digital format where we can organize it, analyze it, and describe it statistically. Next, we go to doing rules-based business process management. We take low-value work and outsource it or automate it. It's very interesting that I read today, I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, an article about where in Oregon, the AFL-CIO has come out and said that because, what's happened is they've been successful getting a higher minimum wage in Oregon, and guess what? There are fewer jobs. Who saw that coming? And so as a result now, they're going back to retailers, and they've passed a law now that makes it illegal to have more than 2 self-checkout stands in a supermarket. Now, because what's happening is all these self-checkouts are being implemented, and so the people that are just order takers at the cashier cashiers are now losing their jobs to them. So, again, that's a challenge we've got here. But again, as we think about these rules-based business process management tools here, there are things that humans certainly don't need to do associated with these. Now, our next thing we've got is learning. And so with this, we have some robotic process automation, maybe recorded macros, recorded routines. Maybe we create some bots and do some training through here. And then at the end here, we have reasoning with AI chatbots and continuous improvements. And so this is kind of a continuum we have to show you how things migrate across here. Now, notice that notice that one is necessary for the first one's necessary for the second one to be successful. When we look at the process tracking, we're not going to have enough data to do the rules-based business process management and to outsource the low-value work necessarily until we have the data from the process tracking in the structured format. Similarly, with RPA, bot creation, and training, until we've harvested the low-hanging fruit for rules-based decisions we can make, we're not going to be ready to go to that next step. Finally here, when we get to reasoning, and when we're looking for predictive analytics and other things like that, it's going to take even more data to accomplish that. So again, process tracking is UPS-style tracking of tasks through the steps in a process. A lot of times, this is the first time that we've been able to take some of this operational data and put it in a structured format. So we don't have to go through and page through a notebook of 300 pieces of paper that are the tracking sheets for every tax return or every set of financials. Instead, we can just put it in a database, put it in Excel, do the calculation. It lets us measure and manage activity a little bit better, and we can better understand the challenges that are going on in here. It also makes it easier for us to find items, that would have fallen off the radar in the past, and it leads to a more thoughtful evaluation of those business processes. With rules-based techniques in here, this is where we're taking now we've mapped the processes, we've looked at them, we've done process tracking, and now we've identified by looking at the data and looking at our population of transactions in here, we've now identified certain decisions that can be made on an automated basis. For example, if I turn in a expense report and I have receipts that need to be on it, and I don't have a receipt for an expense over, let's say, 25 bucks, if that's my limit, then that just gets automatically denied. So we can set up those kinds of rules in here for those, so that again, the first pass at those things, we can build the business logic in so that humans don't have to be involved in sending those, the expense report rejection screens. By the way, the expense report solutions are a very interesting place where those things have been implemented. A lot of these can be implemented with no-code, low-code, no-code solutions by super users. They may have macros and scripting or a rules engine that scrapes screens. You don't have to have that many transactions to be effective, but you've got to identify the opportunities where you've got to make sure that you pursue the things with the most transactions where you can be most effective with your efforts. Next thing we have then is going to be enhanced process automation. And so with that, with the enhanced process automation, what we're really doing here is we're processing unstructured data, doing pattern recognition. Maybe we read source data manuals and come up with a knowledge base and so forth in here. We may have machine learning and conversion of data from unstructured format to structured formats. An example here might be if you needed to implement the new lease standards, you might go in and actually get a tool to read the leases to extract the terms, and then summarize those for you into a specific into a database. So again, this enhanced process automation will use tools like that. The next thing, the final step here then we have is cognitive process automation. And that's where that's the next evolution here. That's where we're digesting large data sets. We have predictive analytics. Again, we're using evidence-based learning and inductive statistics, which are different from descriptive statistics. We can also do things like natural language recognition. So you think about this, all of us do this every day with Google. Ask Google, what's the weather in 37922? And it will actually look up the weather for that zip code and present it to us, and you don't even think about it anymore. But that's some of the things, again, that's what natural language recognition processing really is here. However, it does take a very large data set to be implemented effectively, and so we've just got to bear in mind that this is something that may not get implemented in our small business, but it may get implemented by our cloud provider. Or our companies, our software companies that are doing all this data in the cloud. Because while you may not have the 1 million or 2 million transactions that are needed for some of these AI machine learning tasks, in the aggregate, if you put together, let's say, all the customers of all the firms that use AccountantsWorld and all of their clients that have data in AccountantsWorld, suddenly now you have some opportunity there. Now, I'm going to show you an example here. This is from a monograph put out by the Association of Chartered Accountants of Australia, the Chartered Accountants Association of New Zealand, and KPMG. It's called Embracing Robotic Automation During the Evolution of Finance. And so in this, you can see in this large organization, again, and historically RPA has been the focus of we've been focused more on large organizations and less on smaller ones, just because of the scale. In this large organization, we have an intercompany transaction processing. There are 7 manual processes in here. The time to perform these is 240 hours a month, or roughly 6 person weeks, and the accuracy is 90%. Now, in this whole process through here, they've identified that the 5 middle steps in there are repetitive manual processes, and they can be restructured to be performed with robotic process automation supervised by humans. Understand that doesn't mean the humans don't do anything here, okay? What it means instead is that the humans are working more like plumbers, pushing the data from one step to another, and less like, they're working less like water carriers where the humans are actually carrying 5 gallon buckets of water from one place to another. Okay, so in these manual processes, you can see what we're actually going to do here is we're going to create a automated system, and maybe the first pass at it, we do 20% of the work and get 80% of the problem solved. So the humans still have to deal with 20%, but it's going to be an iterative process where we're going to start out, and when we first start out, we're going to not get great results, but we're going to get better and better over time. In the long term, we're going to end up with those 5 steps automated, and we'll have 2 manual processes. And in this instance, the time to perform this is 20 hours a month, and it's accurate at 100%. Okay, so what happened here is we took these 5 steps in the middle and automated them with RPA tools and robotic process automation tools, and the exceptions are handled manually, and the data is used to update the business logic that's programmed into the process platform. Okay, so this shows you just those 2 side by side. Notice again that we went from 6 person weeks per month to half a person week per month. So it's a significant savings in time and work. Now, there are a lot of different process automation tools out there. I've actually worked some with Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, but there are quite a few others out there, you know, Appian, Bonitasoft, many others out there. And I would encourage you to check these out because they have, there are community editions of these where you can implement a limited number of simple processes with it for low cost or no cost. So I encourage you to check these out. You know, there are many more that we could list up here. I know of at least another dozen that we could list on the screen, but these are kind of the big players in the market. So what can bots do? Well, let me show you an example here. This is one that's actually in an app store or a bot store put out by Automation Anywhere. They created a digital Oracle accounts payable clerk that will do AP payment, AP supplier address book management, AP supplier creation. It'll also manage supplier products and services and manage the contact directory. And so this is the tool here that will, you know, again, the idea is that it will handle many of those changes in here, and you can pay so much a month for this bot and then have it do things for you. Here's another one, a digital SAP accounts payable clerk. And so again, we're automating invoice processing, reconciliation, processing payments. And again, it will work with SAP, Google Apps, and Microsoft Office. So the idea here again is that we're taking these, and wherever we can, we're automating the processes and going forward with them. Now, our next one we have is going to be the Digital Oracle General Ledger Administrator, and this will actually set up in an enterprise context new GL accounts whenever we set up a new unit. So it shows you some of the different things in here that it works with. It'll work with data in Excel, it'll work with Oracle, Outlook, and Gmail, and notice that here are some of the skills that they have involved in it. Okay, so this exists today, and I believe that the way many of you are going to implement robotic process automation is by renting some bots like this or licensing them to run your transactions if they're standardized things. Okay, but when we look at this, if you're not going to write code to create these kinds of routines, how are you going to do it? Well, you could write code. That's the first way. The people have done that for years. You could use recording tools, kind of like the Excel auto record macros, or you can use structured tools like this one you see to the right. This is Automation Anywhere's workbench. It provides access to a wide range of different connections. So if you look at this now, notice we have files and folders. We can use FTP, we can use if statements and do image recognition. I've actually used this to pull data out of Excel, put it into a web page. I've used the image recognition to extract meaningful information from my Verizon wireless statements. So there are things like that that can be done in here. Now, notice that you're going to go through here, and if we look at this thing over here, you can see that this is the script that goes down the side. So if you look at the very back there, you see it says object cloning, click on title bar and sample rock castle construction and so forth. This is actually going to go through and look for all these different things. And so this is the knowledge that's been extracted from these things just based on watching you process a few transactions. So the idea here is that you're going to have a human do this with the robot watching, or with the the RPA tool watching, and then they're going to figure out how to do it, and you're going to go forward. So, you know, maybe 80% of the code writing is done, 90% of the code writing is done by the on an automated basis, and then that last 10% is where you go and put variables into it to change out the values that go in there. So what are some of the things you can do here? You can pull data from Excel or a CSV, enter it into a web page. You can extract structured data from PDF files. You can have a app or a bot watch a folder, so whenever something new is added, it can kick off a workflow for when the new items appear. We can route transactions in accordance with business logic. So maybe when we have an email come into accounts payable at AccountantsWorld.com, we can actually automatically route that to the proper person that needs to receive it after the data has been extracted, and then they can decide what they want to do with it. Finally, here we can create emails and other outputs with data from the inputs that come in. So we got a lot of different things in here that can be done with it. Now, as we look at bots, there are other kinds of bots besides just RPA bots, okay? And again, these RPA, robotic process automation tools, are designed for you to create your own bots to solve some of the problems you have in here. As we look at these, there are other kinds of bots though, like we can have bots that work on instant messaging. You know, Zoho actually has a bot called Zia that you can interact with, and when you need it to find something, it'll use natural language processing to go in and pull the stuff up out of your Zoho information. If you look at Facebook bots and Twitter bots, you know, I don't know how many times I've had somebody that I've known who has somebody set up a fake account. I asked me to be their friend because I recognize the person's face and their name. I go ahead and add them, and then suddenly they start talking to me about you know, $10 million that they have, where they need somebody to invest 50,000 so they can go get their 10 million. You know, and before you know, we're talking about third world dictators and all kinds of other things, and it just doesn't end well. We also have bad bots in here, spam bots that harvest email addresses from contact pages, downloader programs that download the entire website, website scrapers that grab information without permission, and all kinds of other things in here. You know, an example of a place that struggles with these mightily is going to be the airline systems. On 51 of the airline domains, more than 50% of all traffic on there were bots trying to either scrape data off or to get access to, or disrupt the airline ticket sales or do other things like this. Notice that a third of the bots are classified as sophisticated, only 15% were simple, the remaining 52% were moderate. And again, bots are consistent in volume every day except Friday, when there's a peak of robot traffic at 18%. Now, when we look at all of these things in here, we've seen bots where you're trying to buy concert tickets or maybe Hamilton tickets, and you find out that all the good seats have already been bought up by bots because somebody programmed a bot that would automatically go out and buy all of these high-value tickets and sell them off here. We have bots out here that will actually go in and increase the views for your YouTube videos and increase the traffic counts on websites, and can be used to disrupt internet forums and other pieces like that. Now, some examples of some real working bots. Hilton's Connie. So this is a tool they've got that you can use related to your stays at Hilton hotels. Sage Peg, where you can actually take pictures of receipts and enter transactions through that. Zoho's Ask Zia. BotKeeper is one that claims to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and we've got many others out there that we can use, again, to automatically enter receipts or extract data from them or do other pieces like that. You've got a number of different ones in here, but again, an example of one that I might have you go look at is there's a Twitter account called Big Data Batman. So you just go to twitter.com/BigDataBatman, and if you look at that, it will actually watch tweets on the internet that have the word big data in tweets, and then it will retweet those, except when it retweets them, it replaces the words big data with Batman. Okay, so it's kind of an interesting little bot there that they've done here. Yeah, there are a lot of other bots out there you can use, and other automation tools. One for your personal use that you can utilize is one called IFTTT, IFTTT. It actually stands for if this then that, and so this is a tool set you can use to automate certain routine tasks. So one of the bots I have in IFT is anytime somebody follows me on Twitter, it adds their name and their Twitter handle to a spreadsheet that I have on my Google Apps. And so I can go in and look at that and see when somebody followed me and when somebody unfollowed me on Twitter, just based on looking at that spreadsheet, because I have an automated tool that just checks every 5 minutes or so, see if somebody's followed me on Twitter. Okay, so we're ready for our next polling question. What services do you use to automate document retrieval and extract data?
Alrighty, sounds good. Let's upload that third polling question. And just as Brian said, do you use any of the following services to automate document retrieval and extract data? So that would be Checkbook.io, File Dispatch, Receipt Bank, HubDoc, or other, none of the above.
And I wanted to just kind of put this out there because a lot of you may not realize that these tools exist. And, if you haven't tried them out, there are a lot of interesting things that can be done here. It's the opportunities are actually quite interesting that we have to work with some of these tools. Another one that I should have had on this list is LedgerSync, which I know you all have an integration with at AccountantsWorld, Tom.
We do, yes.
Yep. So cool.
Alrighty. We have about 90% here that have voted. Let's give it a couple extra seconds here. Alrighty. Going once, going twice, going 3 times, and let's close it and share those results. So they are pretty overwhelming with one result here, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the following services to automate document retrieval and extract data? 90% said other or none of the above.
Okay.
Is it because that these 4 solutions are less known, or just sort of on the come up? What do you see?
I just think people haven't tried them and they don't know what they don't know about them. So in addition to these, again, I'd have you look at LedgerSync. I'd have you look at these tools are listed up here. I would also encourage you to go out and look at just look at tools out there you've got for automation. You don't have to try them on all your clients, but you ought to try them on 1 or 2. Maybe what you do is you try them on the firm's books instead of on a client's books, just because, if it's a complete bust on the firm's books, then you just, you could go back and fix it, all right? But I think you always need to be tinkering with some of the available solutions that are out here, because as time goes on, more and more of these routine rote tasks that we do that are very repetitive are going to be automated. And, the opportunities are going to be out here with this. Now, I will say that AccountantsWorld's done a great job of picking out great partners to integrate with, like I believe it's not Twilio. There's a project management tool that works with it. There's Checkbook.io for payments. There's LedgerSync for bank feeds and for bank reconciliation. So you've got some really interesting solutions that they work with, and as well as a platform that's designed to automate many of the tasks that we have going on in the client accounting world. Okay, all right, thank you, Tom, appreciate it. Go ahead and move on now with artificial intelligence. And so the idea here behind this is that we're mimicking cognitive functions that humans would do, like learning and problem solving. So, in the early phases of this, we thought of optical character recognition as AI, and now we just consider it to be a solved problem. There are tools, again, we can create routines to extract data from just about any kind of scanned document that's out there or rendered document in here. And we include, the AI now can recognize human speech. So for example, when you call Comcast or Charter or one of the other cable companies out there that has certainly earned their reputation for not being necessarily very customer friendly, when we look at those companies, we can actually go in and they actually can listen to what you're saying in the background while you're on hold for them. And then if you start ranting or saying some of the words you can't say on television or other things like that, suddenly they can route you to a special team that has special training and gets paid maybe a little bit more to deal with the more irate customers. So again, dealing with human speech in here is getting quite a bit better. You know, I don't know if you've noted or not, but I've noticed that the text interpretation that I get from Alexa, from the Google Assistant, from Cortana, from a lot of other places like that has gotten much, much better than it was just a few years ago. So as we're thinking about this now, you know, AI is really just doing more and more things like this. Now, for some of these difficult problems, it's going to require a lot of computing power, and so that's why, for example, Apple has built a whole series of data centers to just drive Siri and to store the data that you have in iCloud. So we have that. It's artificial intelligence also represents an existential threat. Because we can now have drones, we can now have unmanned drone submarines and unmanned drone aircraft, as well as unmanned drone vehicles go out and fight our wars for us. So when the machines start being able to make their own decisions, who's to say when they have to stop? You know, again, if you think back to the 737 MAX in there, we don't want to get in a situation where the machines get too far ahead of the humans here. We also have a lot of risks for devaluation of humanity and, robot rights and superintelligence, just a lot of different things in here to look at. Now, AI originally was an academic discipline, started out at Dartmouth in 1956, and so we look at robotics and machine learning. We'll do things like reasoning, knowledge, planning, learning, natural language processing, perception, and explainability. So when you try to log into a website and you go check the box on on the website after you've entered your username and password, many times if you move they actually look at the movement you make of your mouse, and if you move your mouse in a direct straight line from one point to another point, they'll actually go in and trigger many times that you'll need to then go in and identify some things. And so with this, they'll have a task called a Turing test to verify whether you're a human or a machine, and then they'll actually show you like a series of 9 pictures and ask you to pick out which of the 9 pictures have cars in them. And so by doing that, you'll actually be training a computer how to recognize a car. Or maybe you have pictures of pets and it asks you to pick out the ones that are cats, or pick out the ones that are dogs, or something like that. So as you're thinking about the AI here, understand that there are a lot of different things that we can do with this. The important thing to note here is that one of the things that we've got called artificial general intelligence is 10 plus years out, according to Gartner, and it's the thing where the device can interact, where the device or the system can interact the way a human would with some complex problems. So if we look at traditional AI outputs in here, Deep Blue, an IBM computer, became the first computer playing chess playing system to beat the world human chess champion. We had, of course, again, another IBM question answering system called Watson that won on Jeopardy, beat the humans by a significant margin. And then in 2017, at the Future of Go Summit, AlphaGo, a machine learning and neural network based Go robot, won a 3-game match with the world Go champion, KG, who had been the #1 Go player for a couple of years. Now, what I want you to see here is the things that these have done thus far have been more savant-like and less interacting with humans and so forth. So when we think about this, it's almost like we've got Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man here that can win at all these different tasks, but they're not necessarily things that that are going to where they can take the jobs of humans, because the humans have to be able to interact with irate customers, for example, and other things. Now, a lot of different approaches in here, symbolic things, programming rules, cognitive stimulation, logic-based things, and that were done in at Stanford and other places like that. We also may have something called anti-logic or scruffy, knowledge-based systems, sub-symbolic systems, embodied intelligence in here, computational intelligence, and a lot of statistical methods. Now, if we look at some of the problems, again, AI is trying to solve, we're trying to reason. So we're trying to be able to guess based on limited inputs. You know, you're never going to have full information on anything. So being able to make the best decision you can based on the information you have is probably a good thing. Knowledge representation, where we represent what exists in here, what are the totals, what's the set of objects, relationships, concepts, and properties in here so the software agents can interpret the inputs. Planning, learning in here to automatically improve through experience. Natural language processing, understanding not only verbal human language, but also non-verbal human language. So looking at your face and figuring out, you know, what they should infer from that. Using additional sensors in here to you know, to deduce other aspects of the world. You know, if you think about this, there's a concept that I talk about quite often called digital exhaust, where because so many things we do are tracked by computer systems these days and are processed on computer systems, we now have this exhaust that that tracks our activity in real time, and you know, you can put together all the different pieces to infer where somebody is. You know, an example of that might be if we went out to, let's see here, let's go out to maps.google.com, and let's see here. So if we go out, and I'm just gonna show this to you on the screen here in just a second, but you could actually go in and look at your location history. All right, so if
Brian?
Yes.
We're just starting to get to the top of the hour here, so towards the end of the presentation, so we're going to need to ask the final poll question in the next couple of seconds.
Sure. Okay, super. Well, all right. So we've got some different things in here with AI. I hope you'll look through some of the other slides on AI. Now, in summary here, a lot of efforts are being made by companies to process digital data into meaningful information. A lot of the technologies haven't made it to the mainstream, or they're being implemented only at multi-billion-dollar companies and not at small, mid-sized companies. Just like you know, when I started working in the profession, we used 5, 7, and 14 column paper and adding machines. Just because that's the way it was in 1992, it doesn't mean I don't do accounting today. Okay, I just do it differently, and I have a different tool set. And so, you know, there are some business benefits in here to using some of these things and looking at the new tool set. So I encourage you to check out some of the new tool sets and make sure you're not getting left behind. Talk to people, see what other folks are doing, and try to find ways to automate, where possible, many of the repetitive parts of your routines. So the last polling question is, based on what you've seen today, do you think that you or your clients will deploy RPA tools in the next 5 years? And so I'd like for you to go ahead and answer that polling question, which will be up here in a second. Folks, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. If I can help you, my email is brian@k2e.com. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom and Div.
Sure thing, Brian. I'm finishing up the polling question here. So if everybody could answer that, the question is based on what you've seen today. Do you think that you or your clients will deploy RPA tools in the next 5 years? We see most people are answering this right now. About 89% have voted. I'm going to give it just another couple seconds here, and then we will share the results, and then I will turn things over to Div for the closing here. So about 91% have voted, going once, going twice, going 3 times. And let's share those results quickly here, Brian. So 31% said maybe. We'll see how RPA evolves. And yes, it's likely but not certain. 30% said that answer.
Yeah, and I'm very encouraged by the third answer there, the 26% that said yes, definitely. You know, I think this is the kind of technology that has the real potential to make the same kinds of changes in, you know, with our paperless systems that we did when we went from paper to paperless. So I think it's important that you pay attention and see what's happening in the market, because this is not something that you're going to hear about in the mainstream media. And with that, I'll give it back to Div.
All right, sounds great. So Tom, if you could go ahead and close out that poll and switch it over to me. I want to go ahead and thank everybody for joining us today, and especially thank you to Brian for his excellent presentation. If you haven't downloaded his PDF yet, please go ahead and do so. We'll also include that later on in the email and the follow-up email that we send. Don't forget that you'll have a post-webinar survey that comes up as soon as you close out of your GoToWebinar control panel, or excuse me, your GoToWebinar window. And also, I wanted to remind you our next expert webinar. We normally have these about 2 or 3 weeks apart. Our next one is next week, next Thursday, September 19th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Tom Hood, the president of the Maryland Association of CPAs, one of the most influential thought leaders in accounting. He'll be speaking on sort of his core message this year, which is the future-ready firm and the role of innovation. Even if you've heard him speak elsewhere this year, or you're planning to hear him speak, I think you're going to be really impressed with sort of the unique take on it that he's going to be presenting for this audience. So, if you haven't signed up already, please go ahead and do so at 2019webinars.com to 2019webinars.com, all one word. We'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday at that presentation. And again, thanks to Brian and Tom and everyone else who joined us today for a really great webinar.